bonsoir tout le monde. My name is Alex Neve. I'm a human rights lawyer here in Ottawa, and I'm one of the four commissioners serving with the Ottawa People's Commission. Three of us are together here this evening, and I'll be asking my two other colleagues to introduce themselves in a moment. Before we do get underway, we certainly want to acknowledge that while we are gathering virtually, we are nonetheless gathering in the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and that there's a particularly important significance to recognizing that, given the subject matter of this commission, which is, of course, all about the occupation of a significant portion of downtown Ottawa. And that's not just the occupation of downtown Ottawa, that is the occupation of those lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Lands which, of course, are already occupied and have been for many, many decades. So it adds an extra element that we are certainly very much keeping at the forefront of how we approach things at the Ottawa People's Commission, and really is an underpinning in many respects to so much of what is at stake as we assess what happened back in February. So with that, I'm going to turn things over briefly to my colleagues, Monia and Debbie, to briefly introduce themselves, and then it'll be back to me to get things underway this evening. So how about over to you first, Monia?
Thank you, Alex, and bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone. It is my honor to be at this commission, the Ottawa Public Commission, Ottawa People's Commission, and I am a human rights activist. I live in Ottawa, and I am an author as well. And it is, again, I think, a privilege to hear your story, to hear what you have been through. So I'll look forward to that. And I will pass it on to my colleague, Debbie.
Thank you, Monia, and thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie Owusu-Acha. I use she, her pronouns, and I am one of the four commissioners for the Ottawa People's Commission. I happen to also be an executive director of a nonprofit organization that's located here in Ottawa, and I am also an activist in the community. And so very honored to be here to hear your stories and to hear your recommendations as well on how collectively, as a city, as a community, we can do better. And so thank you so much for joining us, and I will pass it back to Alex.
Thanks very much, Monia and Debbie. As always, it's a pleasure to do this with you. And our fourth colleague, Leilani Farha, is not with us this evening, but she's been involved in many of these sessions as well. As many of you may know, because we've been at this for a few months now, the Ottawa People's Commission is, as its name suggests, very much an initiative that comes from the people, that is community generated. And it's a response to what the community endured and went through during the occupation back in February. And as we've heard through the many people who have bravely and eloquently shared their testimony with us or in community meetings, there was a great amount of harm and abuse that people endured while the convoy was in town. There was also a lot of mobilization and networking and support amongst the people who live in this neighborhood. And it's really from that mobilization and that networking, that the recognition that something like the Ottawa People's Commission was very much needed. And as people had the conversations which led to the establishment of the commission, time and again, there was two themes that kept coming up. One was the need for healing, that there was certainly in February, but continuing afterwards, a great amount of trauma that had been experienced and that was being carried by people. and there needed to be opportunities and spaces for healing. Now, the Ottawa People's Commission doesn't solve in and of itself the need for healing, but it certainly endeavors to be a place where, by giving the space to people to share what they went through, to listen to each other about what happened, that some of that healing can occur. The other theme that very much came forward was people's need for justice, and justice in a broad sense. Not just to see individuals responsible for criminal acts, face the justice system, but for there to be a broader sense of justice and accountability as people's stories are told, and a recognition, therefore, comes together of the ways in which there was a failure of the state, that there was a failure of government to ensure that rights were protected. And so that's certainly very much a focus of how the Commission has been carrying out its sessions, and really points to the fact that we are very deliberately bringing a very strong human rights approach to how we listen, what the questions we ask, and certainly will be at the center of the report and recommendations that come out of this. That there's so much about what happened in February that is all about human rights, not just, of course, the very important rights associated with peaceful protest, which we are all ardent champions of, but the broader human rights that members of this community carry every single day, convoy or no convoy. But human rights needs, human rights responsibilities that became all the more acute and urgent given the circumstances associated with the convoy. So that gives you a sense of sort of the framework and approach and foundation of the People's Commission. We are now well into our work. We've had quite a number of sessions, both online and in person, sessions like this evening, where we've heard from individuals who have come forward to share their experience, their perspective, and their recommendations. We've also had a number of broader sessions, which we've been calling community consultations, which have brought together groups of as few as 4 or 5 people and as many as 50 to 60 people, usually focusing on a particular theme. And so with the combination of those sessions, we've now heard from well over 150 people. We've also received somewhere in the range of 75 written submissions. So there's a wealth of information that is now in front of us. And we're still pleased that we have opportunities to hear more this evening and another session on Saturday. So this evening, we have 3 individuals who will be making presentations to us. We've asked each of them to make brief opening remarks, and then Debbie, Monia, and I will no doubt have questions to ask following their presentation, and then we will move on. Throughout the Commission, we have been very sensitive to the fact that some people are very comfortable identifying who they are. Others have a caution around that, and that's very understandable given the polarization there is around a lot of the issues at the heart of the convoy occupation. We've even actually had some sessions privately with some individuals who didn't feel comfortable being public in any way. But what that means is for this evening, we are leaving it to the individuals themselves to decide whether they want to use their name or not, an alias, their first name, camera on, camera off, and all is fine and is all is very much understandable. And what we would say to the audience is, even if people choose not to fully identify themselves, the Commission itself has verified the identity of everyone who makes presentations here. I think that's it. So we are ready to get going and would welcome our first participant to join us. There we are. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. And I'll turn it over you to introduce yourself as you'd like and to make your opening presentation.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Julia, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you for all the work that you have done so far on the commission. So during the occupation, I was living in Centertown at about Metcalfe and Cooper, and I'm currently still living downtown, but Centertown West more so. For a little bit of context, I moved to Ottawa in October 2019, so less than 6 months before some of the initial COVID shutdowns. And so one thing I want to mention is I can empathize when people speak about feeling lonely and feeling isolated, because I was in the process of getting situated in a new city when and making friends, meeting people when doing so became virtually impossible. I wanted to start with prior to the convoy arriving in Ottawa, I was already feeling frustrated. I was monitoring social media, trying to get a sense of what was going to be happening, and seeing that there was obvious messaging that they were people were planning to stay and entrench themselves had me scared, especially seeing messaging from the police saying that, you know, we aren't worried, we aren't concerned, and we don't really know what this is going to necessarily be either. We don't know what their plans are. I definitely felt frustrated and worried about what I needed to do. Do I need to stock up on food and medication? Am I going to be able to move around? So even before the arrival, there was worry and apprehension. That first weekend, I was fortunate enough to have my partner stay with me at my apartment. He said, you know, just come to my place and stick it out. And I didn't want to feel like I was running away or being afraid. And he stayed with me that first weekend. When we went to walk around to try to get a sense of what was happening, there were issues immediately. We were wearing masks and took them off after about a block of walking because of people yelling at us. My partner is of Lebanese descent, and so he has darker skin, and people were yelling things at us like, you better watch your back, you better take care of her, what the fuck is she doing with you? And police officers were, I don't know if they heard exactly, but we approached police officers afterwards asking if anything was going to be done with all the people yelling things at us. And they told us, again, as early as that first weekend, that they weren't going to be doing much because they didn't want to instigate or further inflame any of the protesters. And I had a call with my therapist on that Sunday, I think January 30th, and she could hear the honking in the background. And so it was difficult to have a session with her. That Monday, I tried to go for a walk and was harassed. I didn't tell some people who were looking for directions where a certain street was, and they said something along the lines of, oh, you must be a fucking liberal, beautiful. I bet you live right there, and I wish I could honk in front of you all day. I reported that to the police non-emergency line, and they said there really wasn't much that they could do. I also at one point tried to speak directly to truckers that were parked in front of my building. And I said, there's no one in Parliament right now that's empty, but you're just pissing off everybody in these buildings around here. And I just got honked at and laughed at. There was no trying to engage in discussion. And there were a couple of bylaw officers in a car, and I looked at them and said, are you just going to sit there and do nothing? And they didn't engage. And so after those first few days, I did end up going to stay with my partner at a bank in Heron, and I'm very fortunate that I had an opportunity to be removed from the worst of it. But I was still anxious every day because I didn't know if my apartment, which was a ground level apartment, was going to be potentially damaged. My partner was also still going into work every day. He was working in person every day. And he was doing community safety walks with people through the Discord. And so I was worried about his safety for sure. I was trying to stay informed about what was going on by looking at the news, and had to eventually just stop reading because it was taking up all my mental capacity, and I was getting anxious and stressed. I was also during that time working from home. My work is located in the Byward Market, and our CEO advised us, told us to all be working from home. We at one point, our office got a threatening phone call because of the CEO complaining on Twitter that her kids couldn't fall asleep because of the honking. And so people eventually found out, she's the CEO of this organization. And so that was also incredibly frustrating and scary, not knowing if something was going to happen at my place of work. And so I wanted to say that as much as I was very fortunate to not be in the worst of it, it was still so I was in a state of anxiety for 3.5, 4 weeks, and not feeling safe, even though I was removed from the situation for the worst of it, not knowing when I would be able to go home was scary and frustrating. And I think that's all I have to say for right now. So thank you.
Thanks very much for sharing that, Julia, and so sorry to hear what a difficult and anxious time that was for you. I imagine we all may have some questions, and I'll turn to my colleagues first. I see Monia's unmuted, so why don't we start with you, Monia? Do you have any questions for Julia?
Yes, sure. Julia, well, again, yeah, I echo. Do you hear me?
Sorry, I'm just going to turn my camera off because I think my internet's a little.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I echo Alex's feeling about really like being sorry to what you have been through. You mentioned calling. Did you call the police when they tell you call the line? Did you call the police, or what did you do to complain?
So I called the police non-emergency line after that, and then I also did make a complaint to bylaw. I guess that would have been the 31st, about the horn honking and noise.
And did you do that? The bylaw, the complaint you did to the bylaw, did you do it by writing, or did you do it verbally when you were when you saw them? How did you do that?
So I phoned bylaw in the morning on the 31st, just to complain about the honking, but then I did also I guess speak to bylaw officers or yell at them when I was trying to speak to the truckers. There was 2 bylaw officers in a vehicle, and after the truckers were just honking and laughing at me, I turned to the bylaw officers and said, "Are you just going to sit there and do nothing?" And they didn't reply to me.
They basically did nothing.
Yeah.
When you phoned them, did they take any detail about? Did you feel that they take your call seriously?
The bylaw officer that I spoke to was certainly sympathetic, but they said that they've been receiving calls like this all day, and that they would certainly take down what I was saying, but that they couldn't guarantee that anything would be done.
And did they come back to you, or did you hear back from them?
I didn't hear back from them, no.
And how about the non-emergency phone call to the police? Did you hear? Did they follow up with you?
They didn't follow up with me, no.
I think I am going to stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Julia. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. Yeah, I echo what my colleague said. It's unfortunate you had to go through that, especially moving to a new city and having to also witness what your partner went through. Really sorry. I did have a question though. You mentioned the fact that your apartment was ground level, and I was just curious. Was that something that you mentioned to maybe the landlord or the owners? I'm not too sure if it's a condo or apartment, but whoever is responsible for managing the building, did you ever voice the concerns around the safety of your apartment, especially being ground level? I'm just curious if that ever came up.
So I actually did reach out to my building management. It's like a apartment building. And so I reached out to the property management group because I wasn't hearing anything about the safety of the building. I didn't mention that my apartment was ground level, but I reached out to them because there was a report of a building trying to be set on fire. That wasn't my building, but it was located close to it. And so I said, you know, this event has happened. We don't know if it's related or not, but you know, I haven't heard anything from you guys, and this property management group typically will send things like community newsletters around the holidays. And so I said, you know, if you can send, you know, here it is for Valentine's, I think that, you know, even just a reminder to be safe and, you know, not let.
Oh, can you hear us?
We seem to have lost you, Julia. I'm not sure if you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Maybe if you...
I think Julia may not be in the call.
Gael, are you able to see whether Julia is still online?
She is still online. I'm going to reach her through the chat and see if we can fix that.
Okay.
Sorry, I was booted for a second.
Okay,
Oh,
you're back.
No worries. Yes, you left off explaining how the property managers often send maybe like memos to those in the apartment about like holidays, but I'm assuming you're getting to a point where they weren't communicating around safety at all.
Yes, yeah. So they emailed and said, well, what are we supposed to do? What do you expect us to do? We're just a property management group. And I said, you know, they said, you know, just, it's always like, we always remind our residents to be safe. And so, but I said, you know, you haven't sent anything like that in regards to what is going on. And I said, you know, even just a reminder to not let guests in that you don't know in behind you, and to just, you know, that I said that would have gone a long way.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you know, it's been a couple of months, almost a year since the occupation itself. Has there ever been any kind of follow-up communication from the property managers around their reflections on how things went? Was there ever a mechanism for residents to share their experiences to the property managers? I'm just curious if that has ever occurred.
It hasn't.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I'll pass it along to Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I had a couple of questions as well, Julia, and I'll stay with kind of the theme of the apartment and how it was managed. Could you give us a sense as to how large a building this is? Is this, you know, many floors with many apartments, or a small apartment building?
It was a smaller apartment building, 4 stories.
Mm-hmm. But and did you have any sense of approximately how many apartments there would be in the building?
I would say around, I think there was a unit that said 31, so I'm guessing there would be around that number.
Okay, so there could well have been 100 people living in that building.
Yeah.
And I'm always interested. I know what the answer is every time before I ask the question, but it's worth asking. 100 people living in the heart of a very chaotic and dangerous situation. Are you aware of any proactive approaches from the police or any other public officials to reach out to the building, maybe even to the property management, just to see how things were and verify whether there were any issues in the building?
Not as far as I was aware, no.
Right. Okay. And you've described a few times when you were trying to get some action from police or bylaw. You've just talked about the 2 times of reporting by phone to the police and by bylaw. But I think when you were making your opening presentation, you indicated that first time that you and your partner went out for a walk, and then you got the taunts, including racist taunts, that you had some engagement with the police at that time as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you maybe give us a little bit more of a sense as to what that was like? What did you ask of the police, and what was their response?
Yeah, so when we were walking around, there was not just the yelling, but there was things like openly drinking from alcohol, like open beverages of alcohol, obviously people like blocking streets and stuff. And so they were just kind of standing there talking amongst themselves. And so we did ask them, is there any plan to try to curb any of this behavior? Is there any plan to talk to them to try to encourage them to tone it down? And they said that we're not planning on doing anything like that because we don't want to I'm paraphrasing here, but piss them off or further inflame them or antagonize them. They said that they were there to just be a presence.
And did you share with them that you and your partner had been taunted and insulted?
I think we did. I think we said that people have been yelling stuff at us. And they said, well, you don't have to be here.
Right.
Well, which I guess is fair.
Well, it is your neighborhood, though, isn't it? And then the other time when you had the conversation with the bylaw officers, when you were trying to talk to one of the truckers, you've described that they didn't even respond to you. What were they doing at the time? Did it look like they were in any way being active, enforcing bylaws, or were they just kind of sitting around and observing?
They were sitting in a bylaw vehicle. They weren't walking around. They weren't talking to anybody. Certainly when I was yelling, they could see that I was doing something, but they didn't get out of their vehicle or do anything.
Right. And then lastly, I wanted to ask you a little bit about sort of what the process was for you when you decided that you would go back to your apartment. So I guess first, when did you go back to your apartment?
It wasn't until after the major police operations were done. I would have to double check some of the messages to I was keeping my family informed. I probably wasn't back into my apartment until the end of February.
And what was it that made you feel, okay, now I can go back? What was it that happened?
So making sure that essential stores around me were open, like grocery stores, there's a farm boy that's close by that was closed. So knowing that I would be able to go about my day. And once my office also felt that it was safe enough for us to go back in, I felt, okay, if people are able to drive and walk into the office and get into downtown safely, then I think that I will be okay.
And was any of that information being provided to you or accessible to you through official channels, the police or the city? Or did you kind of have to do your own inquiring and figuring out, what's going on, what's open, is it safe yet, what's the situation?
It's hard to say because I tried to keep an eye on what like the police were posting on Twitter and what was in the news and what people were posting about on like Reddit, for example. So I was actively looking for information on what was going on, and how people were feeling. But I don't recall there being information about like, these streets are clear or traffic is back to normal in these areas, or anything about like air quality or sound. There was no indication that those particular levels had gone down significantly.
I asked that because, again, thinking of this from a human rights perspective, it's really important that authorities provide citizens, residents, with information they need to be able to make decisions about their safety and well-being. And so I guess I'm just trying to get a sense as to whether you felt you were being provided with that information, or whether you were kind of left to be your own social media private investigator.
I do remember one, like I typically rely on buses to get around, and there wasn't a lot of information posted on like bus stops or anything like that. And I remember thinking, thank goodness I am on social media all the time, because I know that these routes are canceled, or I know that these routes are going around. But I don't think there was any proactive information, even to say like, we feel that residents may be able to go back into the area, but if you feel unsafe, here's what you can do.
Right.
Here's how you can, here's someone you can contact if you feel unsafe.
And maybe my last question here we are, as Debbie pointed out, it's been a while. It's been, I guess, close to 10 months now. How do you feel now? How is your sense of feeling safe, your anxiety around this 10 months later?
I'm hesitant to report things to police and to bylaw. I've been following the Public Order Emergency Commission and hearing that, they didn't have, for example, someone actively monitoring the social media ahead of time, and seeing some of the posts or some of the information that was being shared by people in the Ottawa Police Services. I really don't feel confident. I'm much more likely to go to like the Centertown Helpers Discord to see what's going on, or Reddit to see what people are actively talking about, and see, if I needed help, what information is being shared amongst people immediately. I definitely don't have a lot of faith in wanting to contact bylaw or police, for example.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us this evening, Julia, and sharing all of that and responding to our questions. It's been really helpful to us. So thank you.
Thank you for your questions and for letting me speak, all of you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay, so as we say goodbye to Julia, we're ready for our second presenter. Good evening.
Good
So
evening to you all.
we'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and to make your opening presentation.
Thank you very much. I've been a resident for Ottawa, living in quite a few inner city areas for over 55 years. And I'm a community activist, a bit fearless, and an investigator researcher. And I have about 10 minutes or so of comments.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, turn it over to you to do so again, Ken.
Good stuff. I've never seen the community have such a traumatic event as occurred with the convoy occupation. I've been around a long time. I've engaged in issues like poor tenant conditions to a dysfunctional LRT system that do deeply affect many, but nothing as extreme as this. So late January and first week of February, I saw firsthand the chaos and anguish of downtown Ottawa residents, workers, and businesses, and the failure of 99% of Ottawa institutions to act. I decided as a community activist with a long history of creating community groups that we must fight back. One way chosen was to create a People's Commission to hear from those most affected. I recruited others in February and March. We launched as the Ottawa People's Commission at the end of June. This fall, you as commissioners have been holding hearings and consultations with various affected residential groups and individuals. Many presenters you heard from brought back the trauma that I and others felt. One presentation comes especially to mind, that of Matt. His video presentation filmed the constant horn honking and chaos where he held aloft his sign, which read, "We will not be held hostage in our own city." That's something many of us wanted to say. I felt trauma when going to or around downtown Ottawa. I wrote about my experiences in the Ottawa Citizen in late June. Today, I want to focus on a multifaceted community action plan to assist in the overcoming the traumas and powerlessness so many felt and could feel again with renewed threats on the horizon. Let me first, though, offer a few brief observations on the convoy occupation. First, why were we so let down by authorities in Ottawa, especially by Ottawa police last February, who walked around downtown Ottawa doing nothing much? You'd think the streets of Ottawa would be safe and without barriers, and that fair policing would have prevailed. And despite CSIS and other law enforcement intelligence agencies watching, you think they would see more clearly that the convoy was a threat to national and local security, but they did not. If anything, area police, security agencies, and political officials designated to uphold peace, order, and good government failed downtown Ottawa residents. They did not perform well and blocked the hundreds of vehicles entering downtown to get near Parliament Hill. As well, many local institutions like universities, hospitals, and other community agencies failed to act to assist their clientele and affected employees. Second observation, when I saw the police wave all those trucks downtown on a federal roadway, it made me wonder whose side authorities were on. Truckers and their vehicles tied up downtown and kept honking and polluting with their trucks' diesel fumes. Some residents were verbally and physically assaulted, while many convoy members wandered freely, some shouting freedom and fuck Trudeau at every corner and street they occupied. They took over the so-called protected Wellington Street, so sacred to public access to Parliament Hill, without a single barricade or resisting institution doing anything. Was this an occupation of protest, a love fest that convoy people like to portray it as? Or was it not a more ominous, in-your-face fascist-like seizure and takedown of central Ottawa? Third observation. When public health crises turn ugly, communities can and do suffer. Truckers saw mask wearing as anti-democratic, but mixed their anti-vaxxers' views too often with hate, as they previously did outside area hospital entrances. Their foray that mixed hatred of Ottawa authorities with free to do anything you want to do partying deeply affected the Ottawa community. These trying events led me to conclude that official inquiries into this forced shutdown of downtown Ottawa by truckers, and I must add, by authorities, would not come close to telling the whole truth or be at all helpful to setting and healing Ottawa. Fourth and final observation. There are powerful establishment forces at work who care little for downtown Ottawa. They'd like to take over downtown Ottawa from Wellington Street down and to create a restricted red zone when they so decree. Meanwhile, the convoy groups want back into downtown Ottawa, repeatedly to honor fallen soldiers and celebrate leaders in custody restricted coming into Ottawa, and to advocate taking down key authorities like the Prime Minister. Where all of this puts residents' free movement in downtown or public access to downtown Ottawa or Parliament Hill is secondary, it seems. Now on to my suggested plan of action. First, a caveat. Commissioners are under no obligation to adopt these suggestions. I hope some will be. I also hope this leads them to widen their announced human rights framework, because without measures for community empowerment and group and neighborhood action, healing and justice will remain lofty goals. Suggestions fall into 4 areas: community control, community protection, community monitoring, and community economic renewal. So starting with community control, to work, what we need is to continue setting up a permanent inner-city stakeholders residents-run committee that will press for a safer, more vibrant downtown Ottawa that meets residents' needs. Complementing that, we need to create both a community-wide council to set and reach affordable and environmental goals in Ottawa, and a community crisis center that can help address disruptive forces like the convoy as well as natural disasters. We need to also support an area Indigenous initiated reconciliation circle that could offer a place where longstanding grievances of Indigenous people can be tackled and not ignored. Second, for community protection to be put into practice, Ottawa residents need an accessible civilian police commission board that both reviews police actions and acts as a community police relations center point. Complementing that, we need neighborhood public safety committees attached to strong community associations. It is not sufficient to expect local law enforcement authorities alone will guarantee downtown neighborhood security and peace of mind. Such public safety committees can help fill the gap that regular policing simply cannot do alone. And to function, these communities, safety committees should maintain a liaison with federal security and local police authorities to help ensure that their adjacent downtown neighborhoods receive protection. Third area, for community monitoring and redress of resident grievances, Ottawa residents need a municipal human rights commission that reviews complaints about local discrimination backed up by an enforceable human rights code. It would be helpful too if a National Capital Civil Liberties and Anti-Hate Association would exist again. I was a part of it many years ago, that advocates against discrimination and for our rights, and that acts as witnesses in times of community crises. Such community monitoring would be incomplete without journalists independently reporting on crisis events, backed up by their local association support in upholding their media freedoms. All of this requires a reformed access to information system that allows for timely public scrutiny and full disclosure. We can no longer, during crisis, have secret dealings, unrecorded events, closed-door dealings, and mixed and false messaging. Fourth and finally, for community economic revival after such a crisis, we need fair compensation for the disruption the convoy created in residents' lives. To date, the three levels of government have offered compensation exclusively to the business community, but not to those in businesses and institutions, working force, or to affected area residents. Also need is plans and programs for area economic revival. They're backed up by reinvigorated labor council, along with the local chamber of commerce and civil society groups. In partnership, cooperative employment projects for the areas disadvantaged that include helping house the homeless people of Ottawa could be carried out. So the Ottawa People's Commission is itself a welcome and beginning vehicle to achieve that community revival. Its hearings and consultations have given some residents a voice to tell what happened during the convoy occupation. The Commission has an opportunity to make useful recommendations for Ottawa to heal and grow. That's doing something for residents that the official inquiries like the Rural Commission will not and cannot do. My suggestions, along with others, may assist you in drafting the interim and final report. I thank you. I'm ready to answer any Commission questions, and I will be providing a written submission.
Thank you very much, Ken. And actually, your last words there answered what my first question was going to be, because obviously there was a lot of detail in what you've just shared. So I was hoping that you were going to to present this to us in writing as well, because I think we'll need and want opportunity to go through it more carefully and reflect upon it later. So that's good. So why don't I ask Debbie first if you had any questions you wanted to ask?
No particular questions at the moment, just because, as you said, I feel like there's a lot to read, and but your perspective is really awesome. I think if I do have questions, it actually is related to some of the recommendations, especially the one around economic revitalization. I'm curious if you personally have spoken to any local businesses around their experiences that you might want to speak to a little bit. Yeah.
Indeed, because part of what I do when I go downtown is go to my local credit union, go to the library, go to the hotel where my swimming pool is, that kind of thing. So in particular, for instance, I was going down to get my watch repaired at a jeweler who's right down on Bank Street near Gloucester, and he was totally surrounded by trucks blaring their horns during daytime. Some of his employees, as he said, did not show up to work. They were too afraid. The others were. They had put on extra security in the door. I'd identify myself and went inside. I've known this person, a jeweler, for a few years. He was pretty adamant that he was going to stay open, but he was totally frustrated because he couldn't really run his business, but he wasn't going to close. But it was highly offensive. There were people even yelling through the door. There was another incident which in my mind was quite sad, because for many years on Queen Street near Bank, I've been going to a shoemaker, Cambodia guy who went through all things in his country before coming here and had a pretty darn good business. And he he was shaken by the whole experience. In fact, he stayed open in defiance. He said the police were checking on him, make sure he's good. He was one of the few brave people right in the center of things, trucks parked right over him. And the last time I saw him, he was so shattered, he was closing his business and retiring or getting out of there. I mean, that's what the convoy did to him. The last one I'll give you is my credit manager, who operates in the red zone on Bank in Albert. And he had to shut down. I mean, as he said, most of his colleague financial institutions did. And it was more than frustrating because it's hard for his clients to interact with him and do business. And they were working from home, but in the banking industry, as I understand, that's a lot harder. And I'm would have encouraged him particularly to come forward because he had a staff of several people and many customers. I'm sure this is, the number 2 credit union in Canada, Meridian, and it was very disheartening. I mean, for even when he had to try personally and come into work, not as staff, he had to run the gauntlet through the checkpoints and all the rest. So none of the businesses I talked to, let alone the big guys like the Dorado Center, had a good run of it. When a shack in Confederation Park set up by the convoy with cardboard and can serve hot dogs and junk food, can shut down the mighty Dorado Center, among other things, you got to ask yourself, what is going on here?
Thank you.
Over to you, Monia. Did you have any questions?
Well, I was very interested in some of the recommendation you were sharing with us. And I think you spoke about the neighborhood sort of local communities. Like, can you just
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more about that? As
Yeah.
someone who lived for 50 years, over than 50 years. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, the thing is, we're living in what will become maybe the red zone forever, unfortunately. And, I think we need, just like neighborhood watches do, some alerting system, some common shared doing. And I took my inspiration in part from the Dalhousie Community Association, who several years ago set up a committee to deal with the growing problem with prostitutes and johns in the neighborhood and police and the disruptive actions. And what they did is this committee went to the prostitutes and to the police, created liaison, and created a much better way that would be less disruptive for their community. And it won some city awards, and it was a good motto, I think. I don't think that, and I know one of the steering committees, Brenda Knight, has talked about, having to go to, as part of the Centertown Community Association, get a police guy to do something or not in the official, semi-official capacity of an association. Well, that's not good enough. And it may require funding from governments, but I think, and it doesn't mean armed vigilantes, but it sure means people being conscious of their neighbors, looking after the neighbors, sharing information, not on misinformation and social media about what's going down, because they're on the ground. They see people running through their neighborhood and spitting and leaving shit all over. So they can either calm it down or do things, convey it, if they can hand it to the police or their neighbors. And I think this is going to be a cardinal reality of Ottawa, just as I think that a reformed police commission commission board has to exist, because, as I've worked occasionally in places like ghettos over the years, police community relations are absolutely necessary if you're even going to win minimal trust from people. And if you're not in the community with neighborhood patrol people or whatever, you're going to lose out. So it's a combination, in my opinion, for protection of local people with authorities. And when, by the way, the federal authorities are seriously talking about setting up an integrated Capitol Police Force, I say, great, but wait a minute. All you're selfishly wanting to do is protect Parliament Hill or the parliamentary precinct, integrate forces, which could include local people, even provincial people. What about us? What about the people who are being run, people running through the neighborhood, or you're going to lift barriers so people can come our way? That really means that they have to consider something beyond their own limited plan. I mean, even Trudeau or Solly and people said, well, we have a plan for policing, but the plan never included the community, never included their involvement, never included the fact that maybe they had to think through that Parliament isn't just Parliament, it's a whole neighborhood with surrounding neighborhoods.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. That's all for me.
Thanks, Ken. Over to me then, I guess. First, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about your own experiences during the occupation. It sounds like you were out and about a fair amount, getting your watch repaired and your shoes attended to, etc. So I'd be curious about two things. You've described some of the engagement you were having with small business owners. I'm wondering if you had any opportunities to have engagement with officials, with police or bylaw officers, whether it was to report a specific concern or even just to have conversations.
Well, I went down to do specific things. Like one thing is I swim. So, at the Minto swimming pool in Slater and Line, even underwater, you could hear the damn horn. So you couldn't get away from it. And they surrounded that entire area. I mean, as you've heard, I think on Lion Street, it was worse than on Bank Street or Metcalfe. I mean, it was just incredible what was going down there. Bonfires, firecrackers, with tanks and jerry cans. And it was just like, not a war zone, but not the thing that you normally come across your neighborhood. So I did engage, in a way with the police. I saw hundreds of them. They were just lolling around, usually in teams of about 8 to 10 with their lime vests on, or talking to, sort of the convoy people. But when approached, other than a quick hi or whatever, they weren't engaged. They weren't engaged with the citizens of Ottawa. As for the convoy people, which you may not have asked me, I was masked most of the time and on my bike or whatever, because, I'm used to going where the action is, or I've worked in skid rows and ghettos and with juvenile delinquents and God knows what. I've been in ruckus meetings all my life. And so this was not something new, but what was new was a degree of intensity and the complete lack of understanding of that they were disrupting people. And so when you approach people, they want to tell you about that mask you're wearing, or how could you even think about a legitimate government like Trudeau's, that kind of thing. There was even outside on Lion Street, the People's Party of Canada had a booth selling their T-shirts and so on as people were coming in, families coming in, weekend warriors as I call them, to attend the events. And one of the things that really got my goat was when, they'd be having their families come with them, the flags and they're totally packed cars all over Centertown in that area. And the baby stroller would be empty. What would be in the baby stroller? They'd have the kid on their shoulder, a diesel can of fuel. So, oh yes, we're going to shut down the diesel, the trucks by getting rid of the diesel. Well, I don't think that happened. I mean, I saw huge wagonfuls of diesel running around Rideau and Sussex Street, and people calling in probably with paid foreign money, food stuff for people. It was well organized. even though there were obviously divisions and so on. And when I listen to the Rural Commission and they say, well, we sort of were a little confused what was going on, and we could have done this or that. I don't buy into that. They knew they must have done. If I could know what was happening on day 1 or 2 or 3, come on. I mean, any of these guys should know. I would say also that, what I witnessed was things like hockey games in front of the Supreme Court of Canada. I mean, I saw the partying going on in the tubs and the pig roasts and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I can understand some people who normally aren't part of the establishment and go to the official Canada Day, wanting to celebrate, wanting to feel this is their country. But I don't understand people using offensive flags, offensive verbal assaults, and just total racist comments going around. I mean, the other thing I find highly ironic, because I know the history of the National Library and Archives, they shut off in 2011-12 community meetings being held in space because the feds decided it was their space. Well, one of the things that's happening now is the Rural Commission now. Only official authorized things can happen. So the problem partly is the community takes second seat, and outside the archives, I saw this guy and is literally outside on the other side of the street on Wellington. A guy in his, not even a truck, a car, because there's a lot of pickup trucks too. And every time, by the way, when I go in my pickup truck, people go honk, 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 like it was one of their fellow convoy people. But this guy was honking his horn to no effect, frothing at his mouth. And, the police are just walking by, strolling by down Wellington, turning off down Bay Street, and just, okay, that's okay. It doesn't matter if the guy appears to be a lit wonky, but that's okay. So, I mean, what, you're supposed to go up and say this is no good. So, I mean, one of the things that I did like before the People's Commission, well, during setting up the People's Commission, was that there was other initiatives like class action with Paul Champ Associates that really, I thought, did good because they stopped the damn honking. And, there were some workers' marches and some aldermen with their community walks, safety walks. Would have been nice if there's civil libertarians to have preferred that road. There also was journalists who did some postmortem sessions. So there are people who realized that there was a problem, but everybody to their own. And my concern, in particular in my recommendations, are that this is not a one-stop shopping residential event that can be handled. Come your interim report in January or final report in April. It has to be something that community feels stronger and more empowered, and that there's mechanisms that they can do that the city, who has not issued the auditor's report yet, which is interesting, has to do, because like some of the people have said, the servicing level at the city bylaw officers in the counties you got is minimal. I don't care convoy or not. They don't engage with their local citizens. They're petty bureaucrats at times, and I don't want to belittle most of them, but just like the LRT inquiry showed them not to be the best of people. I also say the same because you've heard testimony from nurses or from students or from people in blocks, to like Julia, that they're property managers, that they're hospital authorities, that their university authorities did nothing to help the people who were troubled, who when they came to work were too tired because they got harassed during the night, who couldn't do anything about it. These people have to understand, when I say community crisis center and so on, they are part of either the problem or the solution. It's not just the police who are going to make the community a better place. It's all of us, and the 99% who didn't. And I will give one thumbs up, because she was a witness and she's a partner of the People's Commission to the Centertown Health Clinic, because they did the exact opposite. They stayed open. They served their clientele as best they could. They made a special effort in certain of their disabled or ethnic communities to reach out. I mean, that's what you do if you're really involved and part of the community. The police, the hospitals, I don't care who you are, they all have to engage, because you don't engage, you're going to have a situation. We're always going to get protests. There's no problem there. But red zones and stay home service people and no effective police, no effective politicians. I mean, Watson royally screwed up with his idea of, oh, let me talk to these guys, like they didn't want to really talk to him. So I may be going on a bit, but
I was just going to say, Ken, I think we do need to move to wrap up. So unless there was something else that you wanted to throw into the mix there, I'm going to thank you for all you've shared with us. There's a lot there for us to work with, which we really appreciate. I think it's really helpful to have specific and concrete recommendations, because this is, amongst all other reasons why it's important to be holding this commission, is we do want things to get better. We want to make sure that the kinds of changes that are necessary to avoid this in the future are actually going to be taken up. And I think you've given us a lot to work with on that regard.
Thank you. And I wouldn't have founded this effort if I didn't think it was going to be fruitful, and sure as hell it is going to be. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us this evening, Ken.
Cheers.
And I believe that means we're ready to move on to our next presenter.
Hi, does that mean I should start talking?
Yes, you are joining by phone, I see, are you?
Yep.
Okay, very good. So I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and make your presentation.
All right, thank you. And please do speak up if there's any problems hearing me. I've had that problem a couple times at delegations.
Okay, you're coming through fine right now.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for this opportunity. And my name is Greg McDougall. I've been in Ottawa a fairly long time. I left for a while and came back. And I haven't really been following the commission too much. It was kind of cool to hear someone who founded the commission going right before me. But I do know kind of what you're doing. And I think it's a good idea. So again, thanks for the opportunity. And I'll just give a summary of what I'm going to say. I know I was told it was 5 minutes. Hopefully I won't go over it. When I tried to just prepare, it was about 11 minutes, so I cut it down.
Don't worry, we won't enforce it too rigidly.
Okay, thanks. I did have a couple. I wasn't downtown too much. I didn't have that many interactions. So I'll give a brief summary of that. But the main thing that I'm speaking about, I saw that you are creating a timeline of what went on in the occupation. And so I'm going to introduce something that I created during the occupation, which was a crowdsourced database, which kind of did that and more. So that's kind of the basis of my presentation here tonight. Firstly, though, like I said, I did go downtown a couple times, Centertown, not right by Parliament or anything. And the interactions I had, I kind of started some conversations. Some people were confrontational back. Some were just like, they were on like the peace and love vibe, which like those are the direct words of a few of them. So I think that just speaks to that there were different people there doing different things and had different awareness of what was going on with the occupation. And I knew a couple of people from activism who aren't fascist, who aren't racist, who are there kind of like challenging government because they don't like some things the government does. But then there was one, so I live like over a kilometer from downtown. And one day I was just walking down the street, saw one of those pickup trucks with a bunch of flags on it. I did some sort of gesture to let them know they were welcome. And they were going the opposite way of me, but about 3 blocks later, I was walking. They had gone all the way around, like, I don't know, 700-800 meters probably, or driving, to find me again. And then so we had a bit of a yelling match, but I didn't feel too threatened because they didn't leave the car, and I was maybe 20, 30 meters away from the road. So those are my direct interactions with people in the convoy, the basic ones, or the noteworthy ones. So now to get into the this database. So first of all, I've been doing grassroots activism in Ottawa for over 15 years, and before that, I was involved in the Indian Media Network when it was first getting going, or soon after it was getting going, which is at the start of the 2000s, and it was like a worldwide network of the first kind of like open publishing activist media, so predating social media and stuff. So I'm coming definitely from independent media as well as like a community organizing background. And how this relates, so to start with, there were a couple of protests that were getting planned, like I think it was the first Tuesday after the occupation started, and then there was one planned for February 4th, that would have been the second Saturday. Both of those, like, I was on email with a bunch of people, like a list of over 100 people, people saying about the protests, people not sure what was happening. So I was like clarifying, I wasn't planning those protests, but I was enough in the loop that I knew what was going on. So I was replying saying, no, they're actually trying to cancel it. Some people are still going to go in case people show up, just to make sure people are safe or whatever. But that was kind of the basis of part of the understanding that communications weren't too good. People didn't know what was going on. There was also, I wasn't invited to this either, but there was a meeting about the February 4th, the Saturday protest. It was called by Reddit people, and they went to the MPP Joel Harden and to a union, PSAC, to get support. And then there was planned this big meeting with like 70 people or whatever to discuss how it could go. But it was kind of like, I don't know. I wasn't there. There was an article written, which I think is a very important article, on it was about the sabotage of the protest, because what happened, and I got confirmation from some people who were at the meeting, the article was correct, was that there was a pre-meeting, so like you could call it a backdoor meeting, where maybe a small group of people decided, no, we're not going to have this protest. And then there's a big meeting, and there's a lot of bullying, silencing of people.
Greg, can I just interrupt you for a minute? Sometimes your voice is I don't know if you're moving back and forth from the mouthpiece or the microphone.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The closer you are, the better we hear you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So there was this meeting where decided that the protest would go ahead. People were still trying to speak in favor of it. I think there's also this divide between like social group of activists. I don't want to say social, but like versus the people from Reddit, others who wanted to do a protest and weren't kind of in the same network. Anyway, so there was that. This protest that I'm going ahead to, the February 4th, I think it was 200 people there or something. A lot of fear around that time, right? I think you're probably aware of that from some of the other testimony.
I'm sorry, Greg, but I think it's getting actually worse, not better. Can you make sure that you're really close to the microphone, or that there's nothing muffling it?
So I'll try to not move at all. So what I was saying was that there's a lot of fear in this decision to not have a protest, but there were still a lot of people who wanted to protest, and there was that. And the social media was amplifying a lot of that, and amplifying a lot of, I don't know, it wasn't going a lot of places. And I felt personally that a lot more people needed to know what was going on, basically. So it was, so I kind of like took myself off social media somewhat and created this database. I think it was about midway through the first week of the, okay, I won't, it's online. It might be February 9th, I'm not sure. But what the database is it's crowdsourced, so anyone could use an input form to add entries. There were 4 categories. There was one that was analysis, so stuff that was coming up that was related, people saying about what was happening. There was one category that was just news reporting, like just saying what was happening. And this was both social media posts and mainstream media posts. The third part was actually like individual instances that happened, like racism or violence or whatever else. And the fourth category was community responses. So that would be like, I think it was a Discord that got started, or mutual aid networks, or protest in response. As I mentioned, there was people protesting at the police station to ask for a better response. Those kind of things are all community responses. And those are the 4 categories. Now I kind of got into this, but the motivation of it is that there's a lot of, like, social media creates bubbles and people aren't connected with each other necessarily. They'll know what people they're already connected with, they'll know what's going on, but there's a lot of different understandings of things. So if you have everything in one place, it can help a lot of people. The other thing is that the digital divide, digital literacy, means a lot of people won't access the information that's there. Obviously, you've probably also heard a lot about misinformation. So if we have a communication system that people know where to go to get everything together and know what's going on, that's really important. So that was the kind of the motivations behind the database. So, and just for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's at equitableeducation.ca. Actually, the post at the top left, a collected coverage of the Ottawa occupation or something. Yeah, it like, I was getting social media dynamics. It wasn't necessarily, didn't go viral at all. It got, I think, over the course of the occupation, after it got created, about 100 views a day. I was doing the majority of input of entry, or some crowdsourcing as well, but a whole lot. And there's also trouble getting it distributed. Like the groups that I thought, the local activist groups that I went to try and get them to send it out, wouldn't do that. It didn't get a lot. It didn't get as much stability or use as it could have. I don't think people really understood the value of it. I think with you doing the timeline now, it kind of reflects that there is an understanding of the importance of this kind of thing, and especially like doing it in real time, like people can use it for like what they're doing in that day, as opposed to just looking back. There's a lot of other comments I could make. That's kind of the basis of it. I think I've introduced a bit of analysis, but I think just overall, I think what I was saying with the convoy people I met and a couple of activists I know that were there, you can't really you can't paint everyone with the same brush, even as the experiences of the violent type of people, or the racist type of people, or the otherwise oppressive people. There's a lot of people there who are just having a good time, whatever. I think it's important to understand that before you judge it. Like now we have people saying like the Bikers Church in Vanier is fascist or right wing or whatever. Just based on this, like everyone who was in the protest is all the same, according to some people. And I think also like when we look at what did get the response, the protest among the community, I think there's a lot of you see the results, I guess, or sense of like social capital, social thing, like who knows who, and that happens. Like one protest called by people on Reddit who didn't have activist connections didn't really go anywhere, and then there was a big protest a week later, Community Solidarity Ottawa. I think it was a week later. And then there was the Battle of Billings Bridge. And you see the Battle of Billings Bridge was like initiated by the sister of the MPP. So you like, and there was another car blockage closer to downtown that didn't get the same big crowds. So I mean, I think those things are good to be conscious of. It's like what kind of things get uplifted and what don't. Just like getting people, allowing people to know what's going on, and try and remove those call them barriers. You call them things that make involvements or
Greg, we're losing you again.
accessing. I didn't hear you.
Sorry, we're losing you again. You're getting quite faint.
Sorry. So what I was saying is just the thing about how accessible things are, how little barriers depending on who you know, what networks you're in, that kind of thing. Trying to like, what are ways to break down those barriers so that various people in various social locations can all access and be included, participate in, and like really a response. And there's many different aspects of that, but I think looking at that is important as we get certain people's experiences uplifted and they're representative of everyone's. So I think that's important. I also think the understanding how social media works in terms of people responding to these kind of incidents is important, but it's like that analysis is way too much to present here. So I think that's about it for now. I do plan to do a written submission as well. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much for that, Greg. And I mean, it's such an important resource in so many respects, obviously to the wider community, but I can assure you, as you've noted, given our interest in building a timeline, it's an incredibly rich resource for us as well. So I think I can say on behalf of all of us involved in the People's Commission that we're very grateful for the fact that you really had the foresight to know that that was a gap, and the imagination and the ability to fill that gap. So thank you for that. And it really, I think it really resonates with a theme that has come up in a whole variety of different ways throughout all of our sessions, which is, and I think you've alluded to this in your comments, was how many problems there were when it came to access to information, the flow of information, who was finding out what about what through what means. Proactively, reactively, it was, to say the least, very deficient. And I think the fact that you've had to do this really highlights that. Monia or Debbie, did you have any questions you wanted to ask Greg?
Yeah, I just had one. Greg, thank you, by the way, for sharing your insights, and very curious to like kind of delve in more on the database as well and see what we can find that kind of aligns with what timeline we're creating. You did mention, because we were talking about, you know, the discrepancy between those who are well connected within the activist community, and you mentioned the Battle of Billings Bridge, but then you also mentioned that there was another kind of action downtown where there was a blockage. I was just curious if you could elaborate a little bit more about that.
Okay, so this is not firsthand information, but it was from following things. My understanding is the same day. It may have been cars coming off the Queensway. I think it was on Elgin. I don't know much more about that. I can picture seeing the video of it or pictures of it. And there was, I think there was maybe a couple dozen people there. At least the pictures I saw. I don't actually know a lot more. It is in the database, so that's a good reference. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Monia, did you have any questions?
I had maybe one clarification. Greg, you were talking about those protests, and then, so you mean, I mean, we have been calling them counter protests. Is that what you mean all along?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Yeah, no,
Planned
that's okay.
counter-protest.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to make sure that. And you said something like fear. You said people are. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Why
So I
why
guess
did you
there's
hear people are fearful? Fearful of what? Repercussion? What? Mhm.
Well, both of those originally planned protests, the one that was the first Tuesday, and
Mhm.
then it would be the second weekend, which I am pretty sure is February 4th. Both of those, the reasons they were canceled or attempted to be canceled was
Yeah.
because people thought it was too dangerous.
Mm.
And that was echoed a lot on social media. I mean, obviously people were experiencing things, but there was also just this like people who weren't anywhere near experiencing anything were also very fearful of what was going on. And that was like social media does a good job of like how would you say fostering emotions virally. And I think the other thing I was gonna say, so it's important to note there was this protest at City Hall on February 4th, which did go ahead, but was kind of like CBC even reported the night before that it had been canceled because some people were saying it had been canceled. But that same day there was like the community safety walks going along, and there was like a group of, this is reported, a group of like 4 or 5 convoy people, kind of like walking around like threatening and intimidating people. So I was thinking like even like kind of brown shirt style. And the community safety walk had to disband because those people were in the area. And it was like a counterpoint to, well, we didn't want to gather in this really big protest at City Hall. So instead we got threatened by this group of 4 or 5 people walking around terrorizing individuals.
Mm. Do you have a feeling or a sense, or did you hear anything about the police dissuading people to protest?
Dissuading, you said?
Mm. Yes.
Yes. So that February 4th protest, there was an editorial, not an editorial, sorry, some sort of reporting. I think it was in the Citizen. There was 3 voices in it. There was a representative of Horizon Ottawa. There was a security expert, I think from University of Ottawa, and there was a police. And all three of them were saying it's too dangerous to counter protest. So don't go downtown.
I see. No, thank you. That's good. I have just one more question. So you created this sort of database or website, or where you have mentioned the 4 categories. And on the other hand, also we hear from you talking about social media, how the social media create bubbles and create like some sort of echo chambers, and people do not necessarily communicate with each other. And this is a question I would like to know your opinion, since you have been working on these issues. In a circumstances like we have been through, like our city have been through, like the occupation, what do you think would be maybe better? Is it necessarily like I don't know, using social media to reach the community, or create a special platform, maybe like some sort of a neutral platform where either from the city of Ottawa, the police, maybe for different, what do you suggest? Or at least what is your opinion on that? Because I think you have some sort of good insight here.
I don't know if there's one solution. I don't think there's just one solution. I think it's good to understand how each of the things that are there already work, and try and work with what's there in addition to kind of like inserting ourselves, I guess you could say, making leverage point things like where can you leverage this in a good way or not. I mean, just like comparing Twitter and Reddit. Reddit's much more anonymous, and it's not like you only see you only see things from the people you know. That's more like Twitter. Reddit is more you just see the things that people think are the best in a community. So there's like an Ottawa Reddit, a subreddit. Whereas in Twitter, there's hashtags to maybe find stuff just about Ottawa, but it's more you're seeing just a general timeline. So those are just different dynamics of two different websites, social media sites. I think postering is really good because it reaches people on the street who aren't connected with either of those things, maybe. And I think it's really important to note is that what, like, I don't know the exact stats, but maybe you think like 10% of people are on Twitter every day. I don't know if that's right, but it's something like that. That means 90% of people aren't. So even though everyone you see on Twitter might say the same thing and know the same thing, it's a false false whatever it's called impression of what people know, because it's only a very small percent of people who actually know all that stuff. And but you end up thinking that like pretty much everyone knows this, but they don't. And that's kind of like part of what I'm trying to get at.
Thank you.
I just had one question I wanted to ask you, Greg. I'm curious if during the convoy, but also I guess afterwards, have you had any engagement with the police or other public officials about the database initiative? Were you getting any kind of reaction from them as to how they felt about it? And I'm wondering, I guess, even the extent to which they may have seen it as a useful resource for their purposes in any way.
So mostly no. There's two instances that I would like to point out. One is the only kind of like official distribution of it. And I was trying to ask different organizations or whatever. Was Sean Menard, and he sent it out over his new email newsletter. But the bit of a problem with that was I think he only sends out his newsletter every second week, and so it didn't go until after the occupation had ended. So he was appreciative of it. I think I might have got one or two other responses from councillors who said that, but I don't know if they sent it out or anything. But the thing about that newsletter is that someone I know who who's not, I don't know them politically at all, but not from political organizing. They responded to Sean Menard and CC'd me, saying that, like, partly commenting that it was really good, but he should have sent it earlier, but also commenting that there wasn't any other really communication from Menard's office, relevant communications, which that made me totally think that Sean was out there like tweeting every day, but that only reached a certain amount of people. So that kind of like informed some of what I was saying earlier. The other part, the only other really thing I can think of that I got feedback afterwards was an academic researcher was doing a study or whatever, like trying to get people's experiences, kind of like what you're doing. Not quite the same, but just like getting people to say what their experiences were. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I have this database, you can check it out. And they were like, wow, like when they looked at it and got back to me, they're like, wow, this is like makes all my work so much easier, kind of thing. Their paper was in French. It was more about the security response to the convoy. So that wasn't quite as much what I'm interested in, but I mean, just that was the response they gave me upon seeing that. But other than that, no, I haven't really heard anything of anyone using it afterwards.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us this evening, Greg, and for sharing all of this. And I guess, you know, more profoundly, thank you for what I'm sure has been an immense amount of work on your part to pull this together. Because, as I say, I think it's going to be certainly a very rich resource for us, and I'm sure for many others. So thank you so much for all of that.
Well, thank
And-
you. Thank you all.
Thank you. So that brings our session to a close this evening, and I'm going to turn things over to Debbie, who's going to wrap things up.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to the three folks who presented today, Julia, Ken, and Greg. We really appreciate the time you took to come to us and kind of share your perspectives and your stories. For those who are unaware, this is our last virtual session. We have our last public hearing that will be happening in person this Saturday, December 10th. If you'd like to attend, which we strongly encourage you to, please go onto our website, opc-cpo.ca, to learn a little bit more about where it's going to be located and any additional details on how you can still share insights if you're someone who's attending, or want to encourage folks in your community to share their thoughts in written form or one-on-one. While we're here, we also want to say a big special thank you to our interpreters for their assistance and their ongoing assistance in our virtual sessions and in-person sessions, as well as the staff and the volunteers who helped us organize this event. Again, strongly encourage you to stay connected with us on our website or on social media as well. And we hope to see you on Saturday, if not in a different format. So thank you so much again. Have a good night and be safe.